The tragedy of Desi Arnaz's life when he married Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was America's sweetheart. She played a clumsy, lovable housewife on television, and 67 million Americans tuned in every single week to watch her. That number sounds impressive now. In the 1950s, in a country of 150 million people, it was something closer to a national religion. When she died in April 1989, the President of the United States went on national television to mourn her. Her funeral was broadcast live. 4 Emmy Awards, 2 Peabody Awards, a Presidential Medal for the Arts. Here is what they did not tell you at the funeral. In 1936, Lucille Ball signed her name on a Communist Party registration form. She hid it for 17 years. When the United States government finally called her in for questioning in 1953, the same year hundreds of other Hollywood actors were being blacklisted, losing their careers, their homes, their entire lives, she walked out of that hearing room completely untouched. Her show kept filming 5 days later. Her name stayed clean. Her face stayed on every magazine cover in America. A man named Philip Loeb was investigated for the exact same thing in the exact same year. He lost his job. He lost his house. He lost the money needed to care for his son, who was eventually committed to a psychiatric institution because there was no other option. Philip Loeb checked into a hotel room in New York City in 1955 and did not check out. Lucille Ball became a national icon. Most of us have been taught to see Lucille Ball as proof that a woman could succeed in Hollywood on her own terms. This video is about what her own terms actually looked like, and who paid the price for it. Off camera, the people who worked with her described someone completely different from the lovable redhead on screen. Cold, precise, a woman who could let someone go without hesitation, and then walk onto set 10 minutes later like nothing had happened. Her own son said the silence after a fight was more frightening than the fight itself. She was married to Desi Arnaz for 20 years. His name was on the studio. His face was on the show. And when it was all over, she bought him out for $2.5 million. 12 years later, she sold everything for $17.5 million. He got the cash. She kept everything else. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how she operated. The communist file she buried for nearly 2 decades, the contract arrangement she built around her husband that had nothing to do with creative vision. The moment on a soundstage in January 1955 where she said 7 words that told you everything about who she really was underneath the performance. And I'm going to show you the one thing she did at the very end of her life, right before it was too late, that still does not have a clean explanation. By the time this is over, you won't know whether to admire her or not. The saint they built. Before you can understand what Lucille Ball actually was, you have to understand what she appeared to be, and how carefully that appearance was constructed. She was born on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York. Her father, Henry Ball, died of typhoid fever when she was 3 years old. Her mother, unable to support the family alone, eventually remarried and left for work, which meant Lucille and her younger brother were sent to live with their grandparents. The grandparents were strict, money was scarce, and there was exactly 1 mirror in the house. When Lucille was caught looking at herself in it, she was scolded. She started performing in local theater as a teenager. By 15, she had convinced her mother to send her to a drama school in New York City. The school sent a letter back informing her mother that Lucille was wasting her time and money and showed no real promise as a performer. She stayed in New York anyway. She modeled. She handed out cigarettes as a promotional girl for Chesterfield. She changed her name to Diane Belmont and tried Broadway, landing chorus work only to be let go from 3 different productions in a row. She contracted rheumatic fever and was bedridden for close to 2 years. She came back and started over. In 1933, She got a small, uncredited role in a Hollywood film. One of the Goldwyn girls. No lines, nobody knew her name. But she was in Hollywood. And once she arrived, she did not leave. By the late 1930s, she was working steadily at RKO, not as a headline star, but as the dependable one, the actress who showed up on time, who knew how to make a scene work, who did not need to be managed. She appeared in more than 40 films in 7 years. None of them made her famous. All of them sharpened her. What is important to understand about Lucille Ball by the time she was 30 years old is this. She had been told she would never make it. She had been fired, dismissed, overlooked, and sent home. And she had come back every single time. Not because she was lucky, because she had learned, through direct and repeated experience, that the only person she could fully rely on was herself. That belief, earned honestly through years of surviving, would later become the engine of everything she built. It would also become the thing that made her genuinely difficult to be close to. The contract trap. In 1950, CBS approached Lucille Ball about adapting her radio program, My Favorite Husband, into a television series. The offer was for her alone. A proven radio personality, strong comedic instinct, already known to audiences. The network was prepared to build the show around her and move on. She had one condition. Desi Arnaz had to be cast as her on-screen husband. CBS pushed back. Their concern was specific. They did not believe American audiences would accept a mixed nationality couple at the center of a prime-time sitcom. Lucille Ball was a white American woman from New York. Desi Arnaz was a Cuban immigrant with an accent and a band. The network's position was that this pairing would cost them viewers. Lucille Ball did not negotiate. She and Desi spent their own money to go on a national tour. She performed her comedy routines, he played with his orchestra. And they proved the network wrong in front of live audiences across the country. CBS ran out of reasons to say no. I Love Lucy premiered on October 15, 1951. Within 2 seasons, it was the most watched program in American television history. Now, here is the version of that story that gets told. Lucille Ball fought for her husband to be on that show because she believed in him. Because she saw what the network could not see. Because she loved him and wanted him beside her. Here is the version that holds up better under examination. Desi Arnaz, in 1950, was a man at the peak of what his life was supposed to be. He had rebuilt himself from nothing in a foreign country. He had a touring orchestra, a reputation as one of the most electrifying performers of his generation, and a career that ran on movement, city to city, club to club, always somewhere new. That life, the life he had constructed from scratch and on his own terms, required him to be constantly in motion. And motion was the one thing Lucille Ball could not track. She already knew, by 1950, that her marriage was not what it appeared to be from the outside. The pattern of infidelity was not a secret she had yet to discover. It was a fact she was living with while deciding what to do about it. Putting Desi Arnaz on a television production schedule, 40 weeks a year, same studio, same city, same building as his wife, solved the problem that had nothing to do with creative vision. A man filming in Los Angeles 5 days a week cannot simultaneously be on a bandstand in Miami. A man whose production schedule is controlled by a company his wife effectively runs has significantly fewer unsupervised hours than a touring musician. The geography of the situation changes everything. Desi Arnaz did not understand that this is what he was agreeing to. He understood it as his wife fighting for him, as a professional opportunity, as proof that she believed in what they could do together. He stepped into I Love Lucy the way a man steps into something built for him, grateful, energized, ready. He did not see the shape of the structure around him until he was already inside it. Desilu Productions, the company they founded together to produce the show, was set up with Desi as chief executive officer and Lucille as president. On paper, he ran it. In practice, every significant creative decision, every major financial arrangement, every key hire passed through her. She was the one who chose the 3-camera filming system that became the industry standard for every American sitcom made over the next 50 years. She negotiated with CBS. She managed Philip Morris, the cigarette brand funding the show. His name was on the company. Her judgment governed every room inside it. For Desi Arnaz, this was the beginning of a particular kind of disappearing act. Not dramatic, not sudden, but steady. The man who had built his identity entirely around movement and autonomy and the freedom that came from never staying in one place too long had been given the most stable, most watched, most commercially successful job in American television. And he could not leave it. Not without leaving everything. That is where the tragedy of Desi Arnaz begins. Not with the infidelity, not with the drinking, not with the eventual divorce. It begins here. On the day he walked into a deal he read as an opportunity, and that was from a different angle, a door closing behind him. The Mask. Here's the central irony that has been sitting in plain sight for 70 years. I Love Lucy, the show that made Lucille Ball the most famous woman in America, was built on a single joke. The joke was this. Lucy Ricardo was a scatterbrained, impulsive, chronically unsuccessful housewife whose plans always fell apart, whose schemes always backfired, and whose long-suffering Cuban husband Ricky was perpetually cleaning up after her disasters. America found this hysterical. 67 million viewers a week found this hysterical. The woman running the studio, controlling the contracts, holding the creative authority over every aspect of the production, and engineering the business arrangement that locked her husband into a schedule she could monitor, that woman spent 22 minutes every week performing the role of the one who could not be trusted with anything important. She was not Lucy Ricardo. She had never been Lucy Ricardo. Lucy Ricardo was a character she constructed and inhabited, and then, every night when the cameras stopped, sat down somewhere off stage. The people who worked with Lucille Ball off camera did not describe the woman on screen. They described someone who moved through a room with a precise awareness of everything in it. Someone who could make a decision and execute it without apparent hesitation. Someone who expected the people around her to operate at a standard she had decided on in advance, and who responded to failure to meet that standard with consequences that were immediate and clear. One word that came up repeatedly among those who knew her well was discipline. Not the warm, encouraging kind, the kind that does not require explanation because it does not expect to be questioned. Her son, Desi Arnaz Jr., later spoke about what it was like to be raised in that household. He described the particular quality of the silence that would settle over the house after a serious argument between his parents. He said the silence was more frightening than the arguments. His mother would appear the following morning with her hair perfectly arranged, her lipstick on, and a composure so total it felt less like recovery and more like erasure. As if the previous night had been rescheduled for a later date when she decided it would be addressed. And not before. The performance never really stopped. It just changed costumes depending on where she was standing. 7 words. January 1955, Monday morning. Studio Complex, Los Angeles. A tabloid called Confidential had hit newsstands with a story. The article was specific. Names, locations, a frequency. It claimed Desi Arnaz had been involved with other women consistently throughout the marriage, not as isolated incidents, but as a pattern. The kind of pattern that had a schedule attached to it. Lucille Ball arrived at the studio that morning with a copy under her arm. She did not pull anyone aside. She did not wait for a private moment. She walked directly across the floor of the soundstage, in front of the cameras, the lighting rigs, the director, the crew, everyone who was already there setting up for the day. and she put that magazine in her husband's face with force. Then she said it. "Oh, I could tell them worse than that." 7 words. And then she turned around and told the camera director they were shooting in 10 minutes. Here is what those 7 words are not. They are not surprise. They are not collapse. They are not a woman discovering something she did not already know. A woman who just found out the truth does not say, "I could tell them worse." That sentence only exists if there is already a worse, already catalogued, already filed, already decided against being used. She had been holding information, deliberately, for an undetermined length of time, and in the 10 seconds of that outburst, she showed exactly 1 card from the hand she was sitting on, then put it back. What the camera director saw next tells you more than the throw itself. Lucille Ball straightened up, walked to her mark, asked if the lighting was set. The professional machine restarted at the exact moment she chose to restart it. She was the one who decided when it started. She was the one who decided when it stopped. That, more than anything else in this story, is who she was. The show was never interrupted. Not once, in all those years, did their private situations spill into the public product they were selling together. The marriage that was collapsing in private continued to be the love story that 67 million Americans believed in every Monday night. That kind of control, the ability to contain an explosion inside a 10-second outburst and then return to professional operation without any visible seam, is not an accident. It is a skill. One that Lucille Ball had been building since she was a teenager in New York, being told she would never amount to anything. She had learned early that the feelings you show are the ones that can be used against you. So she decided which ones to show, and when, and to whom. The Buyout. By the late 1950s, I Love Lucy had run its course as a weekly series, and the partnership between Lucille and DESI ARNAZ, professional and personal, was reaching its breaking point. On March 3, 1960, Lucille Ball filed for divorce. She cited extreme mental cruelty. That is the legal language. In practical terms, 2 decades of a marriage that had operated simultaneously as a television show, a studio, a business partnership, and a genuinely complicated private relationship had exhausted whatever was holding it together. Here is the detail that is usually left out of this part of the story. DESI ARNAZ was the one who asked her to file. He could not bring himself to initiate it. She was the one who made the legal move, though the decision had come from him. The divorce was finalized. The show ended. They went in separate directions. In 1962, Lucille Ball wrote a check for $2.5 million and handed it to her ex-husband. In exchange, she received his entire remaining ownership stake in Desilu Productions, the studio that bore both their names, that had been built on both their labor, that existed because of a partnership that had taken 20 years and everything they had to construct. DESI ARNAZ signed the paperwork and left. What he understood he was selling, a share in a television production company at the tail end of its most successful run. What he did not fully account for, the thing Lucille Ball had always understood and he had not, which is that the value of what they built together was not in the shows they had already made. It was in the infrastructure, the relationships, the real estate, and the operational capacity to keep making things, the machine, not the product the machine had already produced. She did not sell it immediately. She ran it. She expanded it. She used it to say yes to projects that every major network had already declined, including a science fiction series that the executives at NBC had rejected twice. The show was called Star Trek. The other project the networks had passed on was Mission Impossible. Both of them are still running in some form today. In 1967, 5 years after she bought DESI ARNAZ out, Lucille Ball sold Desilu Productions to Gulf and Western for $17.5 million. He had left with $2.5 million. The difference between those two numbers, $15 million, the gap between what he took and what she built from what remained, is not a commentary on his intelligence or her ruthlessness. It is a precise measurement of one thing. She always knew exactly what they were building, and he never fully did. That asymmetry was present from the first day they walked into CBS together. It was still present on the day she signed the sale documents. What the marriage cost him. DESI ARNAZ was not a simple man. He arrived in Miami from Cuba at 16 years old, with almost nothing. His family's property had been seized in a government overthrow. His father had been imprisoned. He taught himself the conga drum in a foreign country, formed a band, talked his way into better venues in better cities, and by the time he was 23 years old, he was performing on Broadway. He was extraordinary. People who saw him perform in those years described something that cannot be manufactured: a natural authority in front of a crowd, a musicality that was both technically impressive and immediately emotional. He built his career from nothing in a country that was not his, in a language that was not his first, in an industry that had no template for what he was. Then he built Desilu, and then, piece by piece, the thing he had built became something he was inside, rather than something he ran. His name was on the company. He sat in the CEO chair. He appeared in every episode of the most watched show in American history, and, in all of it, the actual authority, the creative decisions, the financial calls, the structural power, resided with his wife. Not because she took it from him, because she had been the one, from the very beginning, who knew exactly what she was building and had made sure it was built the way she needed it to be. After the divorce, his drinking increased. His second marriage eventually gave him stability, but the years between the end of I Love Lucy and Edith Hirsch were by most accounts difficult ones. He was a man who had once been defined by momentum, always moving, always performing, always building, and suddenly the structure that had given his life its shape was gone. What he had left was the money. What she had left was the infrastructure, the leverage, the studio, and the legacy. The last call. Edith Mack Hirsch died of cancer in 1985. Desi Arnaz had been sober for years by then. He was alone, for the first time in a long time, in the quiet house in Del Mar he had retreated to after the marriage ended. In 1986, Lucille Ball called him on his birthday. It was a routine call, the kind that happens between two people who have decided to remain civil across a large and complicated history. Somewhere in that conversation, she found out he had been diagnosed with lung cancer. He had already decided to stop treatment. He wanted to go home, which at that stage meant his son's house, Desi Arnaz Jr.'s house, where he could spend whatever time remained without the machinery of hospitals around him. She was devastated. That detail, the devastation, matters. Because Lucille Ball was not a woman who expressed devastation easily or often. She had been the one who held things together while others came apart. She had been the one with the 10-minute recovery time. And the news that Desi Arnaz was dying, delivered in a phone call she had placed as a formality, broke through whatever architecture she had built to manage what she felt about him. She flew to California about a month before he died. Her daughter Lucy had set up a television in the room where Desi was resting, and she put on episodes of I Love Lucy. Lucy did not stay in the room with her parents. She waited outside the door. What she heard through the door was laughter. After Lucille left and began the drive back to Los Angeles, she wept the entire way. A few weeks later, Lucy called with the news that her father was very close to the end. She told her mother directly, "If there is something you want to say to him, the window for saying it is now." Lucille Ball picked up the phone. What she did not bring to that call is just as significant as what she did bring. She did not bring an accounting. She did not bring the 20 years of grievances that would have been entirely legitimate to bring. She did not bring the magazine, the studio, the $2.5 million, or any of the arithmetic of what their partnership had cost each of them. She had spent a career understanding that information was power, and that what you chose not to say was often more important than what you said. She brought none of that to this call. Lucy held the phone to her father's ear, and Lucille Ball said, "I love you." Then again. Then again. The same 3 words, offered without condition or qualification, from a woman whose entire professional existence had been built on conditions and qualifications. His answer came back quietly. "I love you too, honey. Good luck with your show." He died 2 days later. There is one more thing. The date of that phone call, the day Lucille Ball set down every tool in her inventory and called the man she had spent 20 years outlasting just to tell him she loved him, was November 30th, 1986, the 46th anniversary of the day they eloped to Greenwich, Connecticut, with a brass ring that cost 50 cents. Lucille Ball had engineered nearly every significant event in her professional life. She had outmaneuvered a congressional investigation, restructured a network deal, and built an empire from a show the network hadn't wanted to make. She was, by every available account, someone who did not leave important things to chance. Whether she looked at the calendar that morning and understood what day it was before she picked up the phone, whether this final act of saying "I love you" was something she chose to do on that particular date, or whether it was simply the day she was finally ready and the anniversary arrived to meet her there, is the one question in this entire story that nobody can answer. And it is the one question that changes everything, depending on how you answer it. What stays? Lucille Ball attended Desi Arnaz's funeral. She sat with her children. She cried. When reporters asked her to say something about the man she had spent 20 years with, she described him as a great showman and a great force in their shared work. She did not call him a good husband, because he was not. Lucille Ball died on April 26, 1989. She was 77 years old. A rupture of the aorta, sudden, in the early hours of the morning. She had outlived Desi Arnaz by less than 3 years. Here's the question this story does not answer, and does not pretend to. Was Lucille Ball a woman who spent 20 years managing and containing and outmaneuvering the man she had married? Or was she a woman who spent 20 years trying to hold together a marriage to someone who could not stay still, could not stay faithful, and could not be what she needed, and who used the only tools she had ever been given: precision, control, and the strategic silence she had learned to survive in an industry that had told her as a teenager she would never amount to anything? Both of those things can be true at the same time. That is what makes this story difficult. What is not in question is what she built: a studio, an industry standard, 2 of the most enduring television programs in American history, a performance, Lucy Ricardo, so complete and so beloved that it outlived her, outlived Desi, outlived almost everyone who made it. And one phone call on a November anniversary that she may or may not have chosen deliberately, where she said nothing complicated and nothing strategic, and nothing that could be read as anything other than exactly what it was. The woman who controlled every room she walked into picked up a phone and said, "I love you," over and over, to the man she had spent 20 years building and containing and outlasting. He said it back. Then he was gone. Whether that was the truest version of who they were underneath all of it, or whether it was simply the only version left after everything else had been stripped away, is a question that belongs to you now.